Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Welcome to another episode of Extrology. I'm your host, Lee Cooper, and today we're joined by a visionary entrepreneur whose journey encapsulates the spirit of our digital transformation and the power of innovative thinking. Meet Nishant Patel, the CTO and co-founder of Contentstack, a leading composable digital experience platform, or DXP, provider. Nishant's story is one of pioneering success and relentless innovation. Over a decade ago, he foresaw the potential of headless CMS technology, laying the groundwork for what would become a cornerstone in modern web development. His vision has propelled Contentstack to become the go-to platform for marketeers and developers alike, enabling them to craft digital experiences at unprecedented speeds. But Nishant's journey didn't start there. From his early days growing up, through his tenure as a serial tech entrepreneur, founding companies like Raw Engineering and the integration and automation platform Built.io, Nishant has been at the forefront of the API-first cloud-native industry. His efforts have not only shaped the future of digital experiences, but have also made Contentstack a category leader in the content experience platform space. Beyond his achievements at Contentstack, Nishant is deeply committed to nurturing the next generation of tech innovators. His Virar incubator program is testament to this, boosting college student startups in India and empowering them to bring their ideas to fruition. Today, we'll explore Nishant's inspiring journey, from the early inspirations that shaped his path through to the trials and triumphs of entrepreneurship, to his vision for the future of digital transformation. We'll delve into the lessons he's learned, the innovations he's driven, and the impact he aims to have on the world of technology and beyond. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Nishant Patel, welcome to the Extrology podcast. Great to have you here as my guest today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Lee, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. And as I like to do with all guests for context, I think it's really great for listeners to gain some additional insight and understanding if we start from the beginning. So I'm interested to understand, perhaps first and foremost, where did you grow up and who were the key figures or maybe experiences in your early life that shaped your outlook on technology and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I was born in India, in a state called Gujarat. It's sort of Midwest, if you will, in India. And my parents were in Mumbai. That's where they lived. And my dad was running a few businesses. So as I think I was like 4 or 5 years old, my dad decided to put me in a boarding school in a place called Mount Abu. So it's a cute little town up in the mountains in a state called Rajasthan. And his thought process was, if I was going to grow up in Mumbai, there's a lot of crazy things that go on in a big city, and he didn't want me to be part of that. So at a very young age, he put me in the boarding school, and my mom absolutely hated it. So somehow, so I ended up in Mount Abu from, I would say, like 5 years old to like 10 years old. And my mom won out, I guess, after 5-6 years of talking to my dad. And I came back to Mumbai, spent, another 3 years, 3 to 4 years there. And then I had an opportunity to come to America. I guess my aunt, when I was born, she was already in America, and she, applied for this relationship visa or something. And it takes, 14 years or something like that for you to get the visa. So she had applied when I was born, and it came through. And, at 14, my parents asked me, hey, do you want to move to America? And I said, yeah, I do want to move to America. And that's because, if I remember correctly, it was World Book Encyclopedia. So my dad had bought me this, a set of books. This is pre-internet, right? So in the late 80s, so he bought me this book, and it was, of course, everything in that book. A lot of the things in that book was from America. So I just went through all that, and I had this sort of liking for everything America, and so when the opportunity came for me to move, I said, sure, I'll move. And so so that's kind of my early journey. I ended up in Ohio.
Have you ever had any kind of discussions with your parents shared with you the conversation they would have had 14 years prior with your aunt to say, okay, so we're having a son, we've had a son, we're going to send, we want to give him that opportunity to go to America one day. Had you ever had that discussion with them, or have you since?
I did. And this is more to the credit of my aunt. I think they moved to America back in sort of, I think, the mid or late 60s. That's when America was kind of opening up visas for engineers. And my uncle, is an engineer. And so, he migrated, and, my aunt also migrated. I think when I was born, I think the discussion for her and my mom and my dad was just, hey, let's just apply. There's this visa that, could potentially get your kids over to America if it's an option that you could use. And so they just kind of applied, and it benefited me, I guess, way later.
And so you're at 14, you find yourself in Columbus, Ohio, which have you, as you reflect back, can you remember how that felt when you first arrived? Because I guess, and not least, in India would have been a very different place then to what it is today.
It was very different. India was in the late, I think the early 90s, like 91, 92. So I moved to Ohio in 92. And India was going through this transformation. Like, it used to be a closed economy, where not a lot of things from the outside made it into India. It was just a massive economy on its own. And in 91, 92, they started sort of liberalizing and opening up the economy. But I had already migrated to Ohio by then. So it was very different. Growing up in India in the 80s, we had one sort of TV channel, and it was the government TV channel. There would be, I would say a few shows that were from America, right? There was a tech show called Beyond 2000. I still remember it. As a guy named Henry Tenenbaum. And, I accidentally ran into him in San Francisco like 20 years later, right? So he used to have this show called Beyond 2000, and they would talk about all the tech. But in India, you couldn't easily get access to that tech because it was a closed economy, right? So I was kind of drawn to all those things. And when I first landed in New York, it was March of 92. And obviously it was extremely cold. I had never been to a cold place like that. And then the trees had no leaves, and I was like, what the heck is going on here? It's not what I was expecting. But I did enjoy sort of the first snow. And, so my aunt at that time was staying in, one of the aunts were staying in New Jersey. So I ended up at their place, and it started snowing. And I remember it was like, wow, this is amazing. And so there's another aunt that was in Columbus, Ohio. I think, I did ask them, like, how did I end up in Columbus, Ohio, right? And it was a discussion between them, my aunts, and my cousin that lived in Ohio. They decided that it'll probably be better for me to, be in Ohio. So my cousin, who was like 18 years older than I am, he basically drove from Ohio like 8-9 hours, picked me up. Never had met him before. And I ended up in Ohio.
And had you siblings, and therefore, or had you traveled with those siblings, or you traveled alone?
No, so I have a sister. She's 6 years younger than I am. She did travel with me, but she was going to go back. And then the plan was, once I graduate and start making some money, like from college, eventually, they would think about sending my sister to America. So she did travel with me, and my parents also traveled with me. But, they dropped me off, and then they kind of returned back.
That's incredibly brave. How much, this may seem a simplistic analogy to draw, but how much of that perhaps early boarding school experience equipped you, do you think, kind of readied you without maybe knowing it at the time, but readied you for that time, that extended period of time away from your parents? It's quite it's a challenge. I mean, I think we overanalyze maybe these things when we're adults because we kind of sense that, the fear of, and the trepidation and the nervousness and the excitement, maybe, I imagine you were going through a range of emotions, but perhaps in some ways were prepared for it or equipped for it, maybe as a consequence of that time away at school to which you referred?
That's interesting. I mean, I think it definitely played a role because I stayed, by myself in a boarding school as a very young kid. So it definitely helped. I think just my sort of the curiosity towards technology and all, I think helped as well. But, as I think about that, I used to be extremely sort of introvert. And so, it's, on one hand, it kind of helped. And on the other hand, I wonder if, that experience kind of made me even more sort of an introvert, and when I moved to Ohio, like I wouldn't speak to anyone for like 2-3 years. They used to call me Mr. Mute, and this is, so we ended up, so my cousin also was an immigrant, and he had immigrated to America in the early 80s. He was living in this like subsidized housing complex in Columbus, Ohio, and there were a bunch of other immigrants from India, probably like maybe 8 or 9 families, and they had kids that had migrated as well. So I was brought into that sort of community, and there were, good thing, there was a bunch of other kids my age, and, they had already been there, and so they took me in, and, they would call me Mr. Mute because I would not say anything. I would hang out with them, but I would not like say anything. So, that early experience of that boarding school, I wonder if, that kind of made my introvertness even worse, I guess.
And was it, as you recall, as significant a cultural shock at that time as I might imagine? I mean, it strikes me that today the world is a very much smaller place.
Right.
I'd imagine it was a significant cultural shock, maybe? Certainly upheaval, but nonetheless,
absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine. How did you feel when you arrived as you started to settle into life in the US?
It was different. It was quite a bit different. I had never seen white people or black people in my, till that point. And just interacting, the language was very different. I knew how to speak English, but it was still a challenge for me with just the accent and all that. So it was imagine India in the 80s, like a closed India without the internet where you don't get anything, and then you jump straight into a very different culture. I have to say, though, the experience was just amazing. I think everyone kind of took me in. Even for them, it was kind of new, right? Like, I think there was only like 3 or 4 of us, like Indians, in a high school of predominantly like white and black people. And there was like maybe a couple of other Asian kids that became really close friends. So even for them, it was kind of new, and they I think majority of the folks helped us out and brought us in, and it was a pretty good experience.
And when do you mention Beyond 2000? I think you made mention of the TV program that you'd some experience of. But when do you first recall perhaps technology starting to become something that was of real interest? And what was that technology? What was it that first really engaged you and caught your attention?
I would say like it was gaming. Atari 2600 had made it out to India, and my dad had. I'm trying to recall. I think maybe a trip to Singapore, and I think my dad bought me an Atari 2600. And took that back to India, and I just got really into it. And then I would, try to find any place in Mumbai where I could get more games. Like I would travel like an hour, 2 hours in train as a kid to go, buy some games basically for this Atari 2600. So I think that was kind of the first draw. And then just the curiosity was like, how does all this work, right? And I just have that kind of mind where it's like an engineering mind. I would open things up and try to get it all apart and put it all together, right? So I always wondered like how all that worked. And there were some early computers. I didn't have access to them, but wherever I could kind of see a computer, it was very rare. Like in the 80s, there was hardly any computers in India, I would say. And
there weren't many growing up, believe me, in the UK. Very few in the UK.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, like, I mean, it's hard to imagine now, right? But 80s was very different. And also being in a closed economy, I guess the only place you would kind of get that experience would be maybe Cuba or something, right? Today. You still see those old cars and stuff like that. But in the 80s, it was kind of like that in India. There was only like two kinds of cars you could get. And, very few things made it. Like, even in terms of like pop culture from America, like Michael Jackson and Madonna, and there's like maybe three or four things that kind of made it. Especially if you were in like the middle class kind of family. Maybe if you were higher up and you have the opportunity to travel outside of India, you probably had more access. But I didn't have that access.
So when did you start to think that? And we'll come on to your badges. I read that you're known as the pioneer of headless CMS technology. We'll come on to all of these sorts of things. But when did you perhaps first start to think, actually, broadly speaking, software, technology, whatever it might be, when did you first start to think there's a career to be made here?
To tell you the truth, it was like I grew up so my dad ran a few businesses. He had a factory for like, tiles and marble and granite. And then he also was into construction. And at some point he started like a chemical factory. There were a lot of losses and kind of went down to zero at some point. So ups and downs. And I saw him kind of struggle and always, trying to sort of run these businesses, right? Growing up, I always felt like, okay, that's what I want to do. And I would just say that I was just naturally curious, and not just software. Like, I would basically be curious about anything. The World Book Encyclopedia, I just like went and, page to page kind of just went through that, right? So when I came to America, I think it was like 92, 93, the computers like were making it to everyone's houses, right? Like, so this is the time of PCs and Apple and things like that. So my cousin also bought a compact computer just because, he saw me interested in it. So he bought it. And, I just like, I was like, how does all this work, right? So I just kept on reading more and more about it, would go to the library and kind of read more about that. And then I also had other interests like architecture and mechanical engineering and all sorts of stuff. I think if I think back, and I used to work a lot. Like in high school, I worked 40 hours. I would help my cousin in his convenience store after school. So I was working a lot, but I would still consider myself like lazy in terms of career and things like that, right? And so the software bit just kind of naturally happened. Like in high school, we had TI-85s and TI-84, I think, at that time, the calculators. And then, I took some AP classes, like math and science was like, I used to like it and I did really well in it. So, I took some AP classes where our teacher in high school had some connection with TI, Texas Instrument. And so he had, they had a beta program for this like calculator that's like this big. This is in the early 90s, okay? So, and the screen on that calculator was this big with all sorts of math equations you could do on it. And so he joined that program. We got some beta TI-92s, which are not in production today. Like, you could search for it. And it would do all sorts of math for you, like integrals and derivatives, and it will show you step by step of how they get to the answer, right? So it was like mind blowing. I got access to that. I was part of that beta program through this class in high school. And then, I had a programming language as well. So, in the convenience store when I would work there, whenever I would have downtime, I would like try to make a game or something like that on that calculator, programming. And so I think that's how I kind of got pulled towards, computer science. So yeah, I think sort of a combination of all those things, right? Like, and when I say laziness, it's, I didn't really think of like, okay, let me take computer science in college because I had many interests. I just, did really well in high school somehow. It was just like easy for me. And then, I could have applied in a bunch of other schools, but my cousin also didn't really know he would just tell me, hey, you could apply for these like, well-known schools and stuff like that. But Ohio State, which is a massive university in Columbus, Ohio, it's right there. Some of my friends already were going there, the ones that were like 2 or 3 years older than me. And so I was like, oh, I'll just go there. That was like my thing. And to go there, you only had to take like this one simple test. And so that's what I did, right? I could have applied for other schools and colleges that are very well known, but I just didn't want to do it. Didn't want to go through the work.
So let's get on to this headline, this tag as the pioneer of headless CMS technology. I think first and foremost, for the benefit of listeners, I wonder if I might ask you to describe or tell us what CMS technology is first and foremost, and then I have a question around it.
Yeah, so content management has been around for a long time. What it is if you can think of any brand, the way a consumer consumes information, from that brand, it's content. So if you go to a website, you see the text, you see images, you see videos, all that is content. And for a small sort of operation, you could put up a website pretty easily, right? But you could think of, bigger, massive brands. They have tons and tons of content that gets generated. There's teams that are constantly working and updating content, right? And it's not just one market they serve. They usually are global companies, and whatever content they put out, they have to put it out in like 80 different languages, all at the same time. So it gets pretty complex for these massive organizations. So content management software is literally just that. It's software to basically store all your content, and it also helps deliver that content to whatever channel you need it to be. So that's kind of content management simplistically.
So if you're, as I say, I come back to it, the pioneer of headless CMS technology, and what inspired that innovation? And perhaps can you share with us how you navigated the challenges of introducing a new concept to the market?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I'll kind of have to set the stage for this because after graduation from college, I moved to San Francisco, right, in 2000. Like March of 2000, I moved to San Francisco. Amazing time to be there. You could have timed this better because this is kind of the .com craziness, right? And I came at the very end of it. Like I graduated at the very end of it because I think October, November of 2000, the whole thing crashed.
Yeah.
And I experienced it. I used to work at a startup. It literally just shut down. And there was no jobs available, right? So I then, through a friend, got an interview and got, a couple of interviews, got a couple of offers, and I picked a company called TIBCO, which was like integration software. And integration software is, a lot of these big companies have tons of software, for HR, for finance, for support. You got to integrate all that data, right? So there's software for that as well. And so this company specialized or pioneered integration software. So I worked there. I started to work there. So as I started, in a month, they started layoffs. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane. And, by this time, my sister had already moved to America and I'm just taking care of her. And my parents went back. So I had some responsibility. This is like 22, right? I had all this responsibility.
That's a heavy responsibility as well, right? That's if you've got somebody else that you're another human being you're responsible for, that's a big responsibility at a relatively young age.
Totally. And I was stressed. It's probably one of the, if I think back of 20 years, that was like the moment where I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. Because the market had just crashed, there weren't that many jobs available. And I got a job, and 1 month into it, they started layoffs, and every 3 months they would have layoffs for the next 2 to 3 years. So as I was working at TIBCO, I had no choice but to just work hard, and good thing is I liked what I was doing. So, I just delivered on everything that I was thrown at, and I took on all sorts of stuff, and I did really well at TIBCO software. In 2006, AWS, Amazon came out with their cloud, like the first sort of product, called EC2. And I tried it out when I was at TIBCO, and I was like, oh my God, this is insane. You basically don't need like that initial investment of like buying tons of servers to, set up your software, whatever software you're building, right? You could just, it's on demand. And so I really liked it. And in 2007, I decided to quit. And, by then I had the support of my wife. So she also has, I was dating her back in like when I was 21, 22, and we got married in 2003. But, she has her own sort of entrepreneurial journey, and she's kind of the CEO of our company right now, which is Contentstack. But in 2007, she said, hey, I'll keep my job and then you can go start your, entrepreneurial journey. So I quit. I started basically going deeper into the cloud, right? I kind of somehow just said, this is like insane. This is changing the way software is made and deployed. So everything's going to change. So I just like went deep into it. I wanted to build basically an integration product for the cloud. Okay, so something very similar to what I was doing at TIPCO, but I wanted to do it for, start from scratch, build it entirely in the cloud. And then I was like, well, tons of software is just going to move to the cloud. There's a company like Salesforce, I think, kind of took off in those early days, and it pioneered this, software that you could just deliver through the cloud. You don't have to install anything, right? So, and there was a few other ones that started to become popular. So I'm like, software is just gonna, like, software in the cloud is gonna take off. And then the thesis there was like, oh, well, you also need integration then. So the same problem in the cloud. So you need an integration product in the cloud, right? So that was kind of the general idea. Didn't know how to run a business. My uncle had passed away just around the same time I quit my job, and he was in India. So I traveled to India, attended that ceremony, and then one of the guys said, hey, can you give a seminar at a like remote college like outside of Mumbai? I was like, sure, I'll give a seminar and talk about what the latest and greatest in tech, right? So I did that, and then a couple of guys after that said, hey, you talked about starting a business. Can I join you? I was like, really? What do you guys want to get paid? And whatever they told me, I was like, oh yeah, I can afford that. So let's start. So that's I kind of got connected back to India that way, which is amazing. Getting to the headless CMS bit. As a software engineer, all I knew how to do was build software. I didn't know how to run business. So to bring in the money, we basically started taking, software projects. So helping people move to the cloud. And there's a bunch of folks at TIPCO that I knew, so they knew how hard I worked. So they're like, hey, can you help me move this stuff to the cloud? And so I started doing that. And next thing you know, our services business grew tremendously, right? But I was still a product guy. So I would take the profits of the services business and carve out like 1, 2, 3 people team and kind of put them on the side and say, hey, let's build, this integration software. Plus, we were helping people with, content management as well, like old software, right? Moving to the cloud. And we're like, this is crazy. We're just taking this old crap and just deploying it on the cloud and calling it's cloud enabled. It needs to be built from scratch again. That was sort of the thought. And mobile also started taking off like in 2008, 2009. So there was more channels now. Instead of just a web channel for content, there's a mobile channel, right? So there's 2 different channels. And then we said, well, this is going to be insane. Like you're going to have kiosks, digital kiosks, all those things. So the channels are going to keep increasing. You also have the social media channel. So let's just write the content management bit from scratch again in the cloud, right? So that's where we created our like API first CMS, and in 2014, I think Forrester coined the term headless and gave us credit for it. And there's another competitor that they said, okay, these guys have like started this new thing called headless CMS. So it was a long journey towards that. It wasn't just like overnight I came up with this idea.
No, but I think to your point, I'm always struck by the role that serendipity plays in many of these. To your point, spending that time in India, having a conversation with 2 guys who say, can we come work for you? I mean, life is a wonderful array of these twists and turns and circumstances and events that lead us down any one of a number of differing paths. And I think your own entrepreneurial journey from founding Raw Energy to leading Contentstack, and we'll come on to talk about Contentstack in some detail, but you've been a serial entrepreneur. So I'm interested to understand what motivated the transition between your ventures, especially the move towards digital transformation and the API economy?
Yeah, so it was all this progression. So we had this services company, but my heart was more towards product. And the good thing is, as you kind of servicing or helping customers build software products, you're very close to the problem. As a services company, you're like talking to the customers every single day and the problems that they're having, and then you're thinking about solutions using sort of the new tech, right? In at that time, it was cloud and mobile. So how can you sort of help solve those problems with this new technologies, right? And so, the services company kind of took off. Like I said, it just ballooned. And then, I would keep all that profits and basically start a bunch of products, like it wasn't just the integration product and the content management product, which is the digital transformation one. We had a bunch of other ones as well that, I would say commercially they weren't successful, but I think they helped us build tech that we eventually used on some of these successful products. So I think just that journey of just being very close to the customer and the close to the problem, and also just being nerds about adopting new technologies, kind of put it all together. We came up with a product called built.io, which was integration platform as a service. So eventually I got around to building that. We released it in 2015. Wanted to do it in 2007. If I had done it then, it was too early. If I was successful at building that product, it would have been too early for the market. But when we got around to it in 2014, 2015, there was just tons and tons of cloud software by that time, and integration was a challenge. So we created this product, basically help people integrate all this cloud software, right? So we were one of the, I would say, pioneers in that area as well. And there were definitely some competitors there. So we created that product, built.io. And alongside that, we also created this Contentstack product within the services company, helping customers just, manage their websites and mobile apps and things like that, right? Fast forward to 2018, we realized these products were very valuable. As in, if you keep it within the services company, the valuation of that entire company kind of goes down, because services is valued very differently than products. And so we decided to split that. We decided to split built.io, Contentstack, and raw engineering. So raw engineering ended up staying as a services company, and then built.io was the integration company, and then Contentstack was the digital transformation company. So to answer your question, just staying close to the problem and then using all the latest and greatest tech, helping customers go through the digital transformation. I think that's how we kind of got around to this.
And would you suggest that therefore they're the key strategies and philosophies, if you like, that have guided the development and the success that have led Contentstack to become the leader in content and experience platforms?
Yeah, it's staying close to the problem. I think the other one is keep trying new things. So there's a balance, right now the company's been around, Contentstack's been around for a while, the product's been around for a while. There's tons and tons of customers running massive loads on Contentstack today. There's a tendency to keep everything as is, and it's just the human nature, right? Like, hey, don't touch anything, it's working.
It's that old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, looking back, I would say, like, why this journey that I've had, it's usually two things. One is like understanding the problem, being close to the customer, understanding the problem. And then second is these new technologies that keep coming out, and you can argue now it's like at a blazing speed, right? Every day there's something new. You got to be leaning into that, you have to keep your curiosity and keep learning about these new capabilities, and then apply that to the same problems, and at the very end, you'll get value from it, which is, to me, it's just like time. If you have the ability to use new technology to save time for your customers, that is extremely valuable, right? So that we continue to do that today. And, we do have some challenges, like some customers just like, hey, don't touch it. We want to just be where we are. And if we lean into that too much and not touch anything and don't use new things, 5 years from now, we'll have a massive issue with the company.
I was going to ask actually that the pace of change to which you refer, it's lightning speed, blazing speed, I think was the phrase that you used. How do you stay ahead? Because to your point, if you stand still, you're going backwards. Everyone's running past you, and it's such a hugely competitive space. How do you try and stay ahead of where the market is headed, where the customer demand is headed, where the technology is headed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So again, this is just from my experiences in the past. It was, when we started the integration product or the headless CMS product, no one would do it that way, right? And there was no validation. Like, people talk about like market research and do your market research and figure out if people want this. Most of the time, people don't know what they want, right? So experimentation is like key here. You have to, whatever you feel, knowing the new technology. So first, you just got to understand the new capability, right? Whatever new that's out there, you got to understand it. In our case, back in the days, it was the cloud. So we understood the cloud. And then just experiment. Like say, hey, okay, you feel like there's a better way to do it with this new technology to solve that problem. Then just go experiment. And so most of these products, the way we've built it is I would just carve out like one or two people, not more than that, and say, hey, can we do a POC here? And give it like a time frame of like a month or two, right? Take a problem statement, use a new capability or new tech to solve that, and then reevaluate it in a month or two and see if you made progress. And then you say, oh, well, let's push it a little bit further. Let's push it a little bit further. And that's how we came around to a lot of these products. And I think we tend to continue that today as well in Contentstack. So, there's a lot of changes happening, especially in the AI side. We've been experimenting for the last, since ChatGPT came out, I think it's just like accelerated. So have carved out teams on the side that has, some sort of problem statement and they have to solve it with this new tech. Is it going to turn into a product or a capability? I don't know. But the experimentation is extremely important, and evaluating, okay, have we made progress? Have we made progress? What people tend to forget is like, even those failures, I say, if that thing does not end up into a capability or a product, you've learned a lot. Your team has learned a lot, during that experimentation. And whatever you've built will help you somewhere else later in the future. So, we've become an AI forward company now. We started this, a while back. We feel pretty confident with all these AI tools that are coming out today, and we were, I think in the headless world, we were one of the first ones to, wrap some of these AI capabilities and introduce it to our customers. Now, a lot of folks have followed, but, we tend to kind of be sort of ahead of the game just because we keep experimenting.
What about challenges and setbacks? I mean, something that every entrepreneur inevitably will face. Is there a significant challenge that stands out from your perspective that, is the most pivotal, if you like, the most significant, and perhaps what lessons might you have learned from it?
Yeah, I look at the environment today, right? So we, as the entire world, at least in our lifetime, we had never experienced something like this pandemic, right? Like an event that the whole world is experiencing at the same time. And it did some interesting things, for a company. If you look at tech today, everyone talks about the correction. There's so many layoffs and things like that happening. I've seen this, this is the third one for me.
Yeah.
The 2001 was, I personally experienced it. 2008, 2009 was pretty horrible as well. And then what's going on today, right? So what I feel like in the pandemic, there was just, the access to capital was pretty easy. I think the government's just printed a lot of cash and that kind of flowed through the economy. And of course, tons and tons of new companies started and the valuations kind of went off the roof. We also haven't had a correction since 2010, so it's been a long, long time.
Yeah.
So people forget what that is, right? And so in terms of challenges, I think it's just, everyone kind of recorrecting their brain and going back to what it used to be, right? And that's hard. That's very hard. It's how you work, the access to capital that you have, the growth rates and all the things that you would typically need. Even the VCs, they have to correct their mindset in terms of, the returns that they're looking for. The employees have to correct, what is work and what is life and what's the balance between it and all that sort of stuff. So those are some interesting challenges that we're all going through. And, going forward, I think like work, you absolutely have to put in time to work, and of course you have to have a sort of, a good life as well. To me, I just say, hey, we'll give you the tools, we'll give you the ability, like as a company, we'll give sort of the ability to, the benefits of like taking time off and, whatever you need. So you figure out your work-life balance, we'll give you all the benefits and tools and time off and things like that. But work is also important. You gotta put in the time, you gotta experiment, you gotta keep learning these new changes that are coming, right? And what I see going forward, and to answer your question on the challenges, I think people have to embrace change even much faster now. The change management that needs to happen in these companies is going to accelerate. Like there's no tomorrow, right? So, you could like learn a new tech and then wait for, okay, I'm going to write this thing for 2 years, 3 years and carve out my niche or whatever. But that tech will be like obsolete in 2 months.
Do you think there's almost a Moore's law for transformation? That you could almost apply consistent alongside Moore's law. There's a similar rule, a similar metric. It may be a bit simplistic. I'm bungling my assessment, but I wonder oftentimes that the pace of change is accelerating so dramatically and it's compounding.
It is. And I mean, how do you operate in a world like that, right? As a human?
Because it's scary. It's degrees for some people. It's incredibly scary, right?
It's incredibly scary. So I'm just like thinking about like, how do you operate in this world? Like if you want something stable, then I'm sure there's jobs out there that don't move as fast, like maybe the government or something like that, right? So like an extreme example of something that does not move fast. So there might be jobs out there that might cater to you, but if you're in tech, I would say all the companies, regardless of you being a tech company or not, now you're a tech company. You have to be.
Yeah.
Even retailers, brands, everyone has to be a tech company. So if you're part of that, like you have to embrace change. So you just got to be comfortable learning new things and then dropping the old things, and and also comfortable messing up somewhere, because if you stay on the cutting edge, those things are not fully baked, and it could create some problems. I think I love what Jeff Bezos usually talks about, like making decisions. It's like if you are going through a door and it's a revolving door, just make those decisions really fast. If it's a door that's just going to shut on you, like take your time. Most of the decisions are just revolving doors. So in that sense, like if you want to embrace new technology and try it out in your current business, go for it. Of course, hopefully your management is supportive of that. But I remind everyone in my company, hey guys, like it's important for you all to try new technology, apply it to the same problems that you guys are having. It might work, it might not work. What's the worst going to happen? If you can go back, okay, nothing. You just learn something new, right? So just kind of embracing that and just keep moving forward, I think is important. And it's a struggle for some people. It's struggle. Like if something's working, they just went through some big implementation. If it's working, they don't want to touch it now.
It's an interesting insight into the human psychology, isn't it? That we, in varying degrees, but we all fundamentally strive for certainty. We want certainty. If maybe not certainty, at least control. But we certainty, control, however you want to define it. But the reality is, uncertainty is something that we face every day. Uncertainty is what gets us out of bed in the morning. We believe we know what we're expecting through the course of our day. So we have this kind of sense of control and understanding and certainty. But the reality is everything in front of us is uncertain. So actually, the more keenly we embrace that one true constant is change. Nothing is forever. Everything is uncertain. But that's very difficult for some people to wrap their heads around. So we've got these kind of people adopting, embracing change in varying degrees, and it's as I say, it's a fascinating time to be alive, but fraught with all sorts of challenges, fraught with all sorts of opportunities, but a fascinating time nonetheless.
For sure, yeah, and like as you said, as humans, we want that certainty. I have, I've in the recent years sort of keep working on my mindset, kind of being more on the optimism side. Also, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? Like you think through all those things and just kind of be okay with it. And I would say 99% of the time that worst case doesn't happen. So if you kind of walk through, okay, worst case, well, this will happen, it's okay, it's not that bad. Most likely that's not going to happen. So then you're okay with it. So just like move forward with it. So I used some of these tools to kind of be okay in this sort of uncertain kind of world, right? From a tech perspective, I'm extremely excited. The possibilities of what AI and robotics and all these things that can do. Of course, there's some concerns, some massive concerns around what this thing will do, what it will do to our society. But we humans have survived this long, and I think any sort of major shifts, there were tons of concerns, and I'm pretty optimistic in like our ability, like as humans, to sort of figure it out.
I think you're right. I wonder if, how much of a similar challenge did Henry Ford face? How much of a concern were people, how worried were people as to the impact on society if we transition from horses? I don't know. I mean, it's, so I think any dramatic technological shift, has seismic impact. It comes into you mentioned people, and I know talent is, a really important thing for you. And you've emphasized, and I'd read that finding talent in unusual places and fostering innovation is something that you place great stock in. How was that approach impacted Contentstack's growth and culture?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, of course, just from my background, where I come from, I did not go to those, Ivy League schools, or in India, the IITs, and the folks that I have in the company also came from sort of normal sort of life, if you will. And we've built software that people around the world are using, right? So this is, when we first set up our office in outside of Mumbai, it was it's like no one goes there basically. And we had to set it up there because that was the only cheap place we could, rent, and had electricity issues and internet issues. This is like back in 2007, 2008. But, some of the local kids there from that college where I gave that seminar, that they've been amazing, brilliant. They have this like can-do sort of attitude. And, they went through normal schools and they didn't have access to all these like, amazing places like the Ivy League schools, IITs, but they were pretty smart given so I truly believe like if you give access to people that don't have access, I think you'll get some amazing things out of them, because, they want to do good, but they just don't have access to these things,
Is that what inspired you to your Virar incubator program? Am I right in thinking it aims to boost college student startups in India? Is that what partly inspired that initiative?
Totally, yeah. So our office right now in Virar, so we've spread in India quite a bit now. So we're in, so Virar is like this sort of suburb up north of Mumbai. That's where we started our companies, but we've spread to like Bangalore, Pune, and Chennai as well. But in Virar, we've set up an office. It's like a 30,000 square feet office, but it's in this like college, the main college that I talked about. And when you walk into that building, you could see that they're resource constrained. Okay, so the building is not like your fancy building or anything like that, but there's thousands of kids going through that college. And so we ended up building, I talked to the trustees there. They're like, hey, can you set up your office on the top floor? We'll just give that to you. And I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it. So one of the exits that we had from Built.io, that enabled us to like build this awesome office on top of this college. And I'm like so proud of it, because when you come up to the 8th floor, like you walk into the building, it's kind of just looks like a normal under-resourced kind of building. And then you come to the 8th floor and you're like, man, this could be like in Manhattan or London or, like Mumbai or something like that, right? And then also we we do programs where we get the college kids to come and experience the office. We run all sorts of programs there to basically show that, hey, y'all can do this as well, right? Now they have access to mobile phones, internet, all that stuff that, a lot of folks maybe 15 years ago didn't have. They have a bunch of access. Yes, they might not have the money, but it's totally possible in today's world to kind of think bigger and make something like this happen, right? And it's worked out pretty well. The Virar Hub concept, which is like an incubator, we're funding some of these ideas in that local area, which gets overlooked by all the VCs and stuff like that, right? Like they're sitting in Bangalore, they're sitting in Delhi and Mumbai, but there's some really interesting ideas that come up from folks that don't have access to those big cities.
I'd imagine you get a lot of inspiration from it, as well as a lot of satisfaction from it, because it strikes me the way you've described it, kids that are not lacking in talent or initiative or ideas or drive, perhaps resources, and some to some degree expertise or leadership, but fundamentally huge talent pool, great energy, I'd imagine, as well, which is hugely rewarding.
I think that's where I would imagine. So these individuals, if even like 5 of them make it out of 1,000, I think they give back to that community, and I think that's kind of the change that you want to drive, right? If you're in a big city, you're making good money, you just spend it in that city, and it just like continues, and everyone outside just don't get the access. So I personally, I always feel like I'm the underdog, and I kind of get drawn to the underdogs, like, hey, let's show it. Let's show we can do this.
Let's go back to a little future gazing. How do you see the future of digital transformation, and in particular the API economy, evolving, and what role therefore do you envisage Contentstack playing in that landscape?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, especially given what's going on today with all the AI capabilities. I feel like it's completely going to change in the next 2 to 5 years. The question is, like, is software development going to be the same? That's going to change. Code's going to be written by AI. We manage content, right? So there's our companies, our customers they have teams of content creators. How are they going to use AI to generate content, right? It's going to change. Absolutely, it's going to change, because one thing that ChatGPT and all these guys do is like they generate content. So going forward, I think our whole world, in the content management, the digital transformation is absolutely going to change. I think you're going to get these AI agents that will do your job for you. That could be from writing content, writing code, making decisions, basically providing all the services that you would need as a business. These AI agents will kind of do it for you. At least it'll start carving out a bunch of sort of the low-hanging stuff first, and then it'll kind of keep working its way to take the whole thing, right? And it's going to happen. I think humans also have to start getting used to working with these AI tools, right? So that change management is interesting. And how fast are we going to trust these AI agents to do our jobs for us it's a big question, but it's going to happen faster and faster. So yeah, the world of digital transformation and content and everything is going to change in 2 years.
So what excites you about the future? I mean, you mentioned optimism and mindset earlier. What excites you for the future?
I think the possibility, right? Like, I mean, what are we doing? Like, okay, we talk about work-life balance, but do we need more life maybe? Well, the work can be done by these AI agents, right? A lot of the stuff that we do could be done by these AI agents, and then you add robots to that. There's a bunch of things that can be taken care of by these robots. So, but then there's other questions that come up, like what are the humans going to do and all that sort of stuff. So that gets pretty interesting. But from a pure tech perspective, I think I would love to get my time back. Like some of these things that I don't like doing, as my day job today, just managing the entire company. There's a lot of things that I have to do. It's just like, man, I don't want to do this. I want to work on sort of the new tech stuff, right? Do some engineering instead of like some filling out some forms and doing some approvals and, all the other management stuff that you have to do, right? I would love to take even like 10, 20, 30% of that and give it to some AI agents that I can trust, and get some of that time back so I can go, do some creative work. So I'm excited about all those things. In terms of society and what it's going to do to the society, I think I'm pretty optimistic we will, as humans, figure this out. There will be a good balance. There might be some chaos, the continuous chaos, and then we'll find our own balance at some point. But from a tech perspective, I think it's amazing. I would love to get some of my time back.
I think I'm like you. I'm not. This is an accusation I would level at you, but I'm by nature an eternal optimist, and I'm a great believer in the human will prevail, and that we'll work it out. I mean, there are all sorts of existential threats that we could get really animated by, but in reality, I think we'll work it out for the greater good. Maybe that's a naive perspective, but that's certainly, otherwise, I think if I didn't believe that, would I get out of bed in the morning? I may struggle. One final question, if I may, Nishant. I really appreciate your time, but I'm fascinated by the demand of, the demands of running, of that entrepreneurial life and running businesses to the extent that you have been for some time, and how you balance that out with personal life, how you maintain that balance. I mean, you mentioned work-life balance there. How do you manage it? And what advice, therefore, might you give to aspiring tech entrepreneurs who are facing similar challenges?
Yeah, it's tough. I think you kind of have to find your way. There's tons of tools out there, work on your mental, sort of give time for yourself as well. Like, you figure it out, right? Like, you know yourself well. And this is not just for entrepreneurs, but just anyone. If you feel like you're overwhelmed, take some time off, and hopefully you can. And most of these companies, if you go to your manager and say, "Hey, I just need a break for a week," I mean, I think majority of the time you will get it, at least in the tech world, right? So I think in my 30s, I just worked, like, just constant work. I still work quite a bit, but now I'm kind of mindful of, like, how much my body can take it, and so I take some time off. Like, I'll take a day or two here and there and just I completely shut off and just trust my team to manage things, right? And so, I think you just have to use, like, kind of get into sort of those mental models and work on your mindset and, understand yourself and know what your limits are and kind of take some time off. I think on the entrepreneurial side, it's I would say I was naive as well when I went into the journey thinking, oh, it's going to be great. I'll be my own boss. But I mean, it's insane. And the more you have to, like, the perseverance and all that matters. I've been at this for 17 years. I'm still excited, but the challenges are insane. Just ups and downs that you might go through in just one day or a week or a month. It's just crazy. So you have to build, like, your own models to kind of deal with it, right? And there's a bunch of tools out there that you could use, and keep trying and experimenting on yourself as well, right? Like, how do you keep that positivity and keep things going? But if you are willing to go down the entrepreneurial journey, it's extremely rewarding. I always say, like, even without the sort of outcomes, I would have appreciated the journey, because, I mean, for me personally, I got reconnected back to India, which I had completely lost. That in itself was well worth it, right? Besides any outcomes that we got. So the entrepreneurial journey is absolutely worth it. Even if you do it for like a year or 2 or 3, you will see, like, what it takes, and you get a lot of experience from it. Let's say you go back to your job or something like that, the 2 or 3 years or 4 years that you went through that entrepreneurial journey, you'll always look back and say, man, that was amazing.
Fantastic. Nishant, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you. You've given us a tremendous insight into the fascinating journey that you've enjoyed. I really appreciate you taking the time out. Where should we be pointing listeners to find out more? They want to know more about Contentstack. They want to find out more about you and the work that you're doing. Where should we be sending them?
Yeah, so Contentstack.com, that's the company that I'm mostly focused on right now. And, if you want to reach out to me, I'm not on all the other social media channels, but LinkedIn is kind of the best place to get a hold of me. So
fantastic. Well, like I said, really appreciate you taking the time out. Thank you. And my very best wishes to you and your colleagues for the continued success of Contentstack, and indeed whatever other ventures may be on the other side. So really appreciate you taking the time out today. Good luck for the future, and great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it.
Listeners, thank you for your eyes and ears, as always, today with our wonderful guest, Nishant Patel. For those of you that have enjoyed and want to know more about the great range of guests that Extrology is very fortunate to share with you, our listeners. You can find us on all of the major socials. You can reach out on extrology.com, where you can listen back to previous episodes and see the quality of guests that we've had on offer and will continue to have on offer. Or if you want to get in touch, you can DM us on your social platform of choice, or indeed you can email me, lee@extrology.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And if you remember and you've time, don't forget to jump on to wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave us a review. Look forward to seeing you next time. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.